Here is the tool itself. We've got the introduction tab, which really provides instructions for how to use this tool. The main part of this instructions tab is where it says how to use the tool. So it really goes through the step-by-step process of using the main component of this tool, which is the comparison and decision matrix. So the first step is to identify what the study type is that they're trying to calculate sample size for, because that drives the type of calculator that is used and the type of formulas that are used. So working with Statistics Without Borders, we sort of boiled down the type of surveys that the NGO community or implementer community tends to do into roughly 4 categories. So one of those is surveys to detect proportion or mean at a single point in time. This is your needs assessments, your post-distribution monitoring surveys, your knowledge and practices surveys, SMART surveys, etc. The second type that is fairly widely known, of course, is comparative surveys. So when you're trying to detect change over 2 or more points in time, we see this on programs when we're talking about baseline and end lines, when we're looking at a baseline, midline, end line, et cetera, et cetera. The third type that we're seeing more and more of is experimental or quasi-experimental studies. So your randomized control trials, medical trials in some cases, et cetera. And then there's a fourth type that we've actually heard from colleagues across the movement can be very helpful. Some folks really are interested in doing coverage assessments. So for those of you who are familiar with lot quality assurance sampling or LQAS, we included some tools for that type of study as well. The second step is looking at level of difficulty. So if you would like to, you can also filter out calculators that are a little bit more difficult to use. Some of the calculators are a bit more geared towards statisticians or folks with really advanced statistical knowledge. It will ask for inputs that you have to do a little bit more legwork on. So if you want to, you can sort instead for beginner or intermediate level calculators. And then the third option that we wanted to also include as an optional filter is the type of format for the calculator, because we recognize that some of these tools, we included things like Stata, we included things like R, and we know that not everybody is going to have the program budget to be able to download a new software that you might have to pay for. And also, we also recognize that implementing staff, sometimes your IT department has to enter a password in order to allow a download to your computer. And that can be a hassle. So sometimes it's easier to just have a free Excel or a website. We also wanted to make sure that it's sortable for things that aren't online. So if you are working with colleagues that don't always have access to internet, the Excel option is probably one of the better ones, because you can just download the Excel sheet and share it around via email with colleagues so that when they're off internet, they can still use it. So with that, I'll go ahead and do a quick demo. This is what the main tab looks like. Let's say we are getting ready to start up our program and we need to do a sample size calculation for a baseline. So we'll go ahead and select comparative surveys, and you'll see that that narrows down the list of calculators immediately. And then, so you really want to base the level of difficulty on whoever is going to be using the calculator. I'm going to say, I don't really want the advanced calculators. I'm going to go with beginner or intermediate. And you'll see that right there narrows down to only 4 calculators. If you'd like, you can further select by preferred format, or if you want to, you can look at some of the details of each of these calculators. And they've provided a lot of details on what are the pros and cons, where is there missing information, and what specific calculators are actually included in the tool that you've selected. You can select based on the pros and cons, or if you want to just narrow down and you say, you know what, I'd really just like a website. If you sort by that, you really just have one option, which is the select statistics calculator. Or let's say the person who will be calculating the sample size doesn't have regular access to internet, so let's do an Excel, and that will give you 2 options. If you want to go back and select a different sample size. Let's say you're now at the point where you're doing PDMs, post-distribution monitoring. You would just go ahead in this first step and, of course, select the surveys to detect proportion or mean at a single point in time. And then you follow the exact same process. So if you want to do, let's say, only beginner calculators, then you've got two right there. And you see one's a website, one's a free software download. So maybe you just go ahead with the website. And then you can read all about any pros and cons. We've also included a column here specifically around humanitarian contexts or other contexts where you really need to reduce the sample size, because we recognize that that's a major challenge for certain contexts. So this provides some hints about how you can reduce your sample size by, for example, increasing the margin of error, reducing power, reducing the confidence interval, using indicators at the household level instead of at the individual level, etc. And then we also have this third page, which has some additional guidance for colleagues. We really hope that this is something that can be helpful for everyone. With that, I think we are ready to wrap up.